Here, we're going to talk about performance evaluations, and we're going to go for sources to choose from. There's actually 5 different methodologies. The most common one is the boss, the manager. It's usually the most frequent source of performance information, and frankly, it is where most of it belongs. The supervisor is ultimately responsible for the actions of the employees underneath them, so hold them accountable to hold the evaluations and have them sit down and have input as to what the overall assessment of the employees underneath them really is. If they're their employees, they should be responsible for that. But sometimes you sit down as a manager and you look at it in the process, and some people override you. I've seen several of these things where people go through employee of the year is so and so, and all of a sudden the manager's jaw drops open and they're sitting there shocked over the fact that one of their employees got employee of the year, and they're one of the worst employees possible but the worst employee possible talks an awful lot, and they're politically very popular with everybody as you go through. With that being said, as a manager, you need to sit down and be consulted. So sometimes we sit down as managers, we ignore them as they go through as an organization. These are critical people because usually, especially your first line managers, they have some of the toughest jobs because they got pressure from above and the pressure from below in the process. It's like being between a rock and a hard place. And you know what happens. Everybody gets squished in that area over there. Managers, the same thing in the process. But managers usually are the #1 source of performance. Sometimes you have peers out there. We'll talk in just a little bit about a 360-degree evaluation, but peers, a lot of times, they have input into the process as you go through. We talk about technology. We'll talk about some of the peers' input as they go through. They observe the employee and day-to-day activities. They're not expected to provide feedback, and when they do over here, boy, they have input in the process as you go through. And a lot of times, a good manager will ask, how is this person doing over there? And maybe sit down and talk to a mentor in the process as you go through. So managers and peers are the 2 normal ones. And then direct reports, a lot of times, the direct reports can evaluate how the manager treats the employees because they're the employees that are being treated in the process. It's called upward feedback. The only thing is if you're the manager and you got a bad employee, they can give you feedback saying, oh, they're tough. They're tough all the time. They're not very nice. They don't treat me very well. Well, maybe you don't deserve to be treated very well because of the fact you did the following bad behaviors. Okay, but they all have that political aspect of it, of upward feedback. I think it's good philosophically. I'm not certain it really ends up being very positive as you go through. And then self. Not often used as a sole source of performance evaluation, but can be very valuable. There's some employees that'll give you a really honest assessment out there, but some also inflate the assessments as they go through, trying to say, I'm really fabulous. I don't know how you think, but I am fabulous in the process out there as you go through. So self is often used. And a lot of times I've had supervisors have the employees fill out the evaluation and then they comment on the process and make adjustments to it, which is actually a nice time saver. And also you have that dialogue going back and forth, which I think is always positive. Probably the most awesome person to actually ask is, who is the final customer? And service industry is really going by surveys. The problem whenever you have these surveys is what we call the double hump as you go through. In a perfect world, if you have 100 customers, you get 100 responses to, can you tell us how Herbie is doing overall on assessment for handling your needs? You typically will get 4 people that love Herbie, and they'll say, whoa, Herbie is really good. And you get 4 people that really hate Herbie. Herbie's really bad as you go through. And you have the other 92 people are silent in the process. So surveys sometimes don't work very well. People respond better when there's some type of incentive for them personally or their organization as they go through. So, but really, if you can have some evaluations on the customers, that is the ultimate way of actually sitting down and having an honest assessment, because what is being done, and is that employee sitting down there developing a long-term relationship between your company and that customer as you go through. One of the ones that has come into being in the last 20 years is called a 360-degree appraisal. This is phenomenal, but it sucks the life out of an organization as you go through. There's very little bias in the process. But what you do is you sit down and have a group of people sit down, evaluate the employee that's there. This is normally a manager, some type of leader as you go through. In our case, I had a college president come to me and says, David, I want to do a 360. Okay, there's different models out there. Let's talk about having 12. I don't want 12, I want 20. 20 people to assess everybody. Oh yeah. So I created this model. We had each employee chose 25 people and the supervisor would strike 5 off the list. So all of a sudden you have 20 people evaluating each manager in the organization. Not bad, except for the fact when you have 100 managers, that's a huge number of evaluations. So literally, we had performance appraisals due in May. And so I sent a reminder out in March, the whole organization would slow down because of the fact that everybody's busy doing evaluations. It took 20 minutes to do an evaluation, and there's so many evaluations. I had one dean had 15 evaluations to do. If 20 minutes times 15, you're talking 300 minutes of time during work time when they already had their calendar packed full. It really sat down and slowed everything down in the process. Eventually, we throttled it back down to, 12. Okay, and the boss had to admit that, David, maybe you were right. Maybe. Okay, I was right. Anyway, that being said, the 360 really is a great thing. But I had a situation where I'm the vice president, in that case, of human resources. I had the people that I'm negotiating with at the bargaining table on a contract. Let's see, sometimes that's called adversarial bargaining. I had the college's position and they had their position. And if I'm in the middle of being evaluated and I'm in a tough negotiations and we're nose to nose sitting down saying, no, you can't have that 7% raise, 3%, all you're going to get. That could be really terrifying if that person across the table from you is evaluating you. So I was breaking a sweat in the process. I think it's good, but you got to watch it in the process as you go through. So there's 5 sources of information on performance: managers, direct reports, peers, self, and customers. And really, one of the best ways out there is called the 360-degree appraisal, and it has seasons of interest as people go through, but a lot of times it's so huge and intense, it bogs down the organization as you go through. Either way, we've covered a lot of really good models here. There's some good stuff to keep long-term. Take care.